Hey everybody, this is the Katana Podcast. Of course, I'm Invisible Katana. Thanks for listening. It is the day after Thanksgiving, so I guess happy Black Friday or, happy belated Thanksgiving. I guess I've never actually heard anyone say that, but it technically works. Hopefully you guys had a good Thanksgiving and it wasn't, too crazy for you guys today either, because odds are when you hear this, you have already done your Black Friday shopping if you hadn't already done it yesterday, since things kind of get started on Thanksgiving now. But hopefully that was good for you guys. You got all your good deals and your nerdy items in your games and stuff. I was able to get the one game I wanted, even though it took forever. I went to Walmart and basically they lost a pallet of games, and all I wanted was like the new Assassin's Creed, or Rogue at least, the one on last gen. And that was all I went in there for. I got in there, I wasn't there. I wouldn't have been there too long. It was like, I got there maybe 5:30. Things went on sale at 6. And I went back there, and the reason I knew that I didn't miss the game is because they were supposed to have Call of Duty there too, the brand new one. And I knew it was like those are the two games that just came out this month, and those happened to be the only ones missing. Like everything else, like there was Borderlands, which was there, and Destiny, but it was like the two, really big ones. I guess Destiny was meant to be super huge or whatever, but it's like those two just weren't there, so I had to go through a bunch of crap. And of course, with it being Black Friday, it's a lot harder to just find a manager and just be like, hey, can I do this and do that? So I had to go get one of the games out of the regular display case, which typically aren't honored under the deals. And then I was like, all right, I was told I could get it honored and this and that. Finally got the game. Took me forever, but I got it. So, I guess it was worth it. I don't really know, but I was able to get the one thing I wanted. Saw a lot of people in there who just made me really want a PlayStation and Xbox One, like a ton of people around me. I was just like, man, I really wanted it, but got to save my money for something else. So hopefully you guys got your items, had a good time. Of course, if you want, you can put what nerdy things you got below or what random stupid crap you guys had to deal with on Black Friday. But the first topic that I actually want to get into, I just, of course, had to mention that because yesterday was Thanksgiving. But the first topic I really want to get into this week is actually about movie franchises and, them being brought back after a long time, whether it's through reboots or it's just sequels that come way, way, way down the line. And the reason I wanted to do this is because recently we've had two big movies where they have had sequels that were, really far from the originals, and one was like Dumb and Dumber 2. And earlier today was another great example of that, and this is the one I really want to talk about. And it was the Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens trailer. It actually came out today, and it was really cool. Like, I love Star Wars. I'm sure there are a ton of nerdy people out there who just, like, lost their minds. If you happen to listen to Dave and Chuck the Freak, it's on 101 WRIF. I love those guys, so they're really funny. And Chuck on the show, he's, like, a super, super nerd, so I can't wait to hear that episode Monday. I don't know if they talked about it this morning because I'm actually, like, really far behind. But I can't wait to get to the episode where Chuck is just like losing his mind about the new Star Wars trailer. I think it'll be interesting to see what he has to say about that. But movie franchises coming back, whether it's through reboots, and I guess you could kind of throw TV shows in here too sometimes. Like 21 Jump Street is like the only one that really comes to mind as far as a TV show that kind of gets a movie way down the line. But TV shows getting movies getting these reboots or just really far off sequels where it's just like decades in between. It's just really crazy to think about that. And technically Star Wars is like we've had the prequel ones, but even that's been a little while. It hasn't really been like a super long time or anything, so it's not insane. But I think one of the big things about Episode 7 is the fact that because it takes place after the original trilogy, that's why, you kind of skip over the prequels, because it's like, following in order, it goes the prequel trilogy and then the original trilogy and then the new Star Wars film. So it's like I tied the new Star Wars films far more to the original trilogy because that's kind of, those characters are in this movie. And it's like, man, I skip, you go straight back to the original trilogy just because of the storyline of it. And I'm really excited for it. And typically, when things like that happen, reboots or, far off sequels, It's really iffy, and reboots especially. Reboots I think are like the worst ever sometimes, and it just can be a disaster. It was like the Footloose remake. I didn't see it because I had no reason to. I like the Footloose movie, the original. Red Dawn had one. I like Red Dawn, the original. I didn't see the remake because didn't want to. The only remake that I really wanted to see, and I thought it was amazing, was actually the Evil Dead remake, because I loved the original Evil Dead movies. I guess the two Evil Dead movies and then Army of Darkness. But I love all three of those movies, and I was so excited. And I loved it when I went to the theater to see Evil Dead when it came out. I loved the remake. I bought it on Blu-ray because I thought it was really well done. It was just a great one. And then, another trailer that had just come out recently was Jurassic World. Like, that's the other really big thing where it's like, it's been a long time, and it's been, of course, much longer for the Jurassic Park franchise than the Star Wars franchise even. But the last one we had was Jurassic Park 3, and honestly, I think that was like 2003, so it has been about 10 years. And, I'm excited for it. I don't really know what to expect. It's like, we had the little teaser trailer, or I guess the full trailer now, but it seemed interesting. It's a cool concept. Everything they have is like, this is what the park was meant to be and stuff like that. It's all this future tech. It seems like it takes place in the future based on the technology they even show in the movie, but it just looks really cool. Like, I love the concept of it. I would love to see the actual image of this dinosaur that they created. And if you haven't seen either trailer, I'll try to put a link below to both. The Star Wars one is like impossible to find online. Every time you look for it, you find like a billion fake versions where like everyone's like, the new Star Wars trailer, and it's like a fake version just so they can get a bunch of views and money, which is really smart, but I hate those people. But I can definitely find the Jurassic Park one, so I'll put that one down below. But I thought it looks really good. I want to see this dinosaur that gets created. So, this is like spoilers for the trailer, as if that matters. But they make this new dinosaur to, I guess, attract more people. Like, they get a ton of people in. It's always really crowded. It's basically like Disney World for dinosaurs, which I think would be amazing. But then you have like this crazy genetic, dinosaur that they create to have something new, and it goes nuts. And that's like the focus of the film, is that they have to take out this one dinosaur. But there are a lot of interesting elements. Like, one of the biggest things is actually towards the end of the trailer, and they have one of the characters, he's riding on a motorcycle, and there are like velociraptors running next to him, and it looks like they're kind of helping him take out whatever he's chasing. And that's really cool. And like, the story behind that is he's supposed to be like this behavior analyst or whatever for the dinosaurs, so he kind of trains them like pets, and that's just how that works. So that seems really cool to me. I of course can't wait to get another trailer and get maybe an image of this dinosaur. They might save that for like the final trailer when they decide to do that, but I'm excited for it. I'm, of course, like anyone who really loves Jurassic Park, I'm worried because, not because of 3, admittedly, like, I don't really worry about like, oh, the last movie was really bad or anything, so the next one might be bad. I worry about this stuff just in general. It's like, hey, if it's been almost 10 years since you've made this last film, unless it's all the exact same people, I tend to get very, very worried about that stuff. And even new technology makes me a little worried about how certain films will be, because with the Star Wars thing, it's like, okay, I was very curious how it was going to look, because even though I know the prequel trilogy, and it's much, like, it almost seems like centuries above the original trilogy as far as special effects, I was really worried, like, is this going to be like current CG where it just, it's like, oh, it looks really CG and stuff like that, and is it going to look too CG for Star Wars to me? And I was worried about that because I'm a super nerd. But when I saw the trailer, I thought it was really, really well done, especially they have the part with the little droid, and he's like, he basically rolls around. He's like a giant ball and a little head on top. That was probably my favorite part of the trailer, just because you could tell it was like at least it seemed to me like part CG, part practical, if not all practical, which is always the best. And it could have been all practical, and they just had like a giant remote control ball that they could spin, and maybe it has like a little line through it so that the head can just stay where it is. But it looked amazing, and like the CG on the Millennium Falcon looked great, and it just looked really good. They had like new CG for the lightsaber, and it's like a new type of lightsaber, so that's why they did that. And that looked really cool. They changed some stuff with the stormtroopers, which I don't mind because it looks cool, and also it's like decades in the future. Like it's actually as many decades as we've had since the last original trilogy. So it makes sense that stuff wouldn't just stay exactly the same for 30 plus years. So it was really cool. Like I enjoyed that. I thought the CG looked right, and it wasn't insanely over the top. But that's one of those big things I worry about when we have these films where maybe the original came out in the 80s or early 90s or something like that, where we didn't have the insane special effects and things like that, and then we have it now where it's technology being what it is, kind of everyone already knows this, but basically you get something and 6 months later there's a better version. And it's a lot like that in the movie world. It's much slower as far as CG effects and everything. However, it's still unbelievably advanced every time it happens. So when you have these giant bridges between sequels, or heck, you even just do a reboot, it's just one of those things. And I won't take forever on reboots, because the point is with those, they typically just kind of suck. And it's like, there's no need to really do anything. If anything, what people should do is just re-release movies in theaters, and people would pay for it. Like, I think that would work way better than releasing reboots and stuff. And you'd be surprised how well that would probably work, especially depending on the film. Like, Star Wars would make so much money if they did that right now. Like, I would definitely go see it. Even if it, like, I've seen the special edition. I've at least seen A New Hope. I saw that in theaters when it came out because I was really young. And when they re-released on VHS with the new special effects, and they changed some things around and stuff like that, I went and I got to see the movies in theaters, or at least the first one. I only have like one memory, and it was from A New Hope. So I probably didn't see Empire Strikes Back and Return in theaters. But if those came out, and even if it was the original ones, which technically I've never seen, and I almost feel ashamed of myself for that, but even if it was those, like the original trilogy with no extra special effects, none of that stuff, I would definitely pay. I'd go to a matinee. I wouldn't pay like almost $20 to see it, but I'd pay the earlier price, and I definitely enjoy a good old fashioned Star Wars, and just sit in the theater, and I'd have a great time with that. And I think it would be an interesting thing to do, to re-release films in theaters, even if it was just like a little limited run or something. I think that would work. And I remember this happened years ago, and they actually did it with Scarface, and it was like for 1 week only. It was like, go see Scarface in theaters, and that was really interesting. And I had no interest in seeing Scarface. I have seen it since then, but yeah, like it's Scarface. So even as a kid, it was like everyone kind of referenced Scarface at some point. So I knew what Scarface was, and it's like, wow, that movie is so incredibly popular. And I knew when it came out relatively, since I was so young. It's like, man, that came out years ago, like before I was even born, and they're re-releasing it because it's that amazing of a film. Even if it was just for a week, it was like, hey, you got 7 days, you can go see Scarface at the theater. So I think that type of stuff really works, especially for big films like that. Like I said, Scarface, Star Wars would definitely work. I don't know about more, like, I don't know if I would consider Footloose a cult classic or anything like that, but I don't know about those types of films. Like Breakfast Club specifically, I think would work, and a lot of other John Hughes films, 16 Candles, things like that. Those I'm sure would work, because I'd probably go see Weird Science, even though I've seen that movie like a million times. I still have it on my DVR from, I think, early last year. So I'd probably go see Weird Science, because that's a funny movie. But certain films just work. Home Alone would probably work, to get a little bit more recent at least, even though it's still not too recent. But having these big gaps is always really interesting, and also very scary to see. Like, are they gonna do it right? Are they gonna make the sequel right? Is it gonna hold up to the original? And odds are, it really just depends. Like, there are almost a million different factors. It's who's taking over it now, what is it gonna look like I mentioned with the CG and all that stuff. but there are just so many different elements. And then, we always worry as nerds. That's kind of what we do. Is it gonna hold up? Like, is it somehow gonna make us nostalgic, and also say this is a great way to interpret the series today, and like, leave the theater and instantaneously be nostalgic for the new version, as well as the old version, or the old film. And it's just a very difficult line to walk for directors and things like that. But sometimes when it's done right, it's just done right. Evil Dead, like I said, is an amazing example of that. I thought it was just unbelievably well done. I love that whole movie. And I've only seen like the little teaser we've had for Star Wars. It looks great. They've done some interesting things with it. The story seems like it's going to be really cool, and focuses a lot on the Force. Of course, it's called The Force Awakens, so everything about that so far, at least, seems like it's going to be really good. And then we have Jurassic Park coming out. Probably one I'm most iffy about, just because of all the craziness. Like, one of the big things they have to explain is how it even came to be Jurassic World. I mean, they went through Jurassic Park already, and it was like, that kind of failed. People, like, a guy got eaten by a T-Rex on a toilet. And then the Lost World Jurassic Park, a guy got eaten by 2 T-Rexes, and he was ripped in half. And then one of those went to, a city and just, like, destroyed the whole place. So it's like, how did they get to that point where they went from all that craziness to, like, let's try this a 4th time, because they tried it a 3rd time. Although I don't really remember the story of the 3rd one. It wasn't like, it was kind of its own island. And it seems like they may have gone back to that place, which I believe was also kind of similar to the Lost World Jurassic Park. I don't really remember all the locations and stuff. But I'm sure they're going to explain that fairly soon in the film. But that's one of the big things. Like, how do you logically explain something like that? It's just like, someone was just like, we should make money off of it, but let's ignore the fact that, it failed one time, and then just a super crazy event happened that had nothing to do with the park technically, but it just flat out ended up with a dinosaur, like specifically a T-Rex, charging through the city. So, that's one of those things. Like, how do you logically explain that? And granted, there are just greedy people on Earth. They could easily play that role where it's like, a douchebag came in and had $1 billion, and we were like, okay. Like, sometimes that's just how the world works. So technically that could play out that way, but it's just one of those things, story elements. And I'm not worried about the CG for Jurassic Park. Like, the Star Wars thing is just like, oddly enough, Star Wars being so practical as it was in the originals, and even the CG stuff that they had in the prequel trilogy is just like, we're far more advanced than even that stuff. So, like, you can watch, if you happen to watch, like, the Clone Wars maybe, or if you currently watch Star Wars Rebels, what we can do with CG, and what they do for Star Wars. They do some amazing CG stuff for Star Wars. Like, the shows are made in CG. So they could do all sorts of insane stuff, and, of course, make it look far more realistic than Clone Wars or Star Wars Rebels. But they could do that type of stuff, and it still works. And it's just one of those crazy things that looks like it's going to be good as far as Star Wars goes, but it's just one of those things, once again, that they kind of have to walk that line. But, of course, I want to know what you guys think about it, as far as sequels coming out decades apart. Like, if you've seen, like Dumb and Dumber 2, or if you love Jurassic Park. So what do you think about, Jurassic World? And if you do love Star Wars, which once again you do, what do you think about the trailer, if you've seen it? If not, I know I can't put a link. If I can't find it, I won't. But I can definitely tell you guys to go to Emergency Awesome. He did a cool analysis of the trailer, and he basically plays the trailer in the beginning of the video. So, I'll put a link to his video if I can't find the actual trailer itself. But yeah, you can watch it in his video. That's how I ended up seeing it, because, like I said, it was just like, every time you search it, all you get is a bunch of fake ones where they throw in clips of the trailer, and then they add a bunch of their own stuff, and it's like, well, I can just tell that that's not good CG. Although the first time I was watching, I was like, I don't know if this is real or not. I don't know what I'm looking at. But definitely put your comments down below and let me know what you guys think about, just long sequels. Like I said, if you saw Dumb and Dumber and you saw Dumb and Dumber 2 recently, how do you think those compare? If you, even the reboot stuff, even though it's not too tied into this topic, if you saw like some good reboots and things like that, like if you, even though 21 Jump Street was like completely different from the show, but like the Red Dawn stuff and the Footloose, I guess, if those somehow manage to be good, please put those down in the comments below. But moving on to topic number 2, with the holidays coming up and the new year, us entering 2015, one of the biggest things that's going to be happening next year, and I don't know when it's really going to blow up like all over the internet, but I'm sure it will fairly quickly next year. But we are entering 2015, which I have to know this, which is, for anyone who watches my videos, if you're already subscribed to me, the hat that I wear in pretty much all of my videos is from Back to the Future Part 2. Like, that's my favorite film of all time, is Back to the Future Part 2. So next year, in 2015, that is the year that Marty McFly and Doc Brown travel to in the film. And one of the big things is, since that movie came out in, God, I think the second one came out in it might have been 1988 or something like that, 89. Since that movie has come out, it's always been like, okay, 2015, we have to have flying cars and we have to have hoverboards and all this future stuff that they had in the film. And one of the big things, one of the silly things really, is they had like Jaws 30 as like a hologram. And Jaws didn't get there, but, Saw technically didn't. But if that came out back then, it probably would be at 30 by now. And it seems like it already is anyway, with how many they have coming out. And heck, Paranormal Activity might be the one that takes over for Saw as far as just crappy sequels coming out every single year. But in 2015, like, Back to the Future is going to be like the big thing that people are going to be talking about, because there are a ton of nerds like me who love Back to the Future. People are going to be getting the hats and getting the jackets. I'm definitely I have to get a hoverboard by next year, or, before October of next year. I believe it's October, that this specific month they go to. But, Back to the Future is such a huge thing in like the nerd world. It's, if it wasn't so big, it wouldn't have come out on like Blu-ray again during the 25th anniversary. They don't do that type of stuff for crappy movies. Like, that's just not gonna happen for some stuff. You aren't gonna see, like, in however many years, like the Resident Evil movie or any video game movie ever. I don't want to say ever, but none that we've had so far, at least. You aren't going to see any of those coming out like, it's the 25th anniversary of this movie right here, because no one is going to give a crap about those crappy video game movies. However, for a great movie like Back to the Future, or, Star Wars to throw back to, or even Jurassic Park when that was re-released, it's one of those big things that just comes back, and so many people are going to be talking about it. It's... I'm hoping that it does really get insane, where people are just, all I see is like Back to the Future stuff all the time, because that's great to me. I love Back to the Future, so I would love to see that stuff. And we do technically have hoverboards. That was like the biggest thing that happened. I don't want to say that was the biggest thing that happened this year. That was one of the biggest things that happened this year as far as nerds are concerned. We do officially have hoverboards, which is fairly amazing. They aren't nearly as cool as the ones in, Back to the Future, but that's because when you make new technology, it's not instantaneously going to be like super lightweight and stuff like that. But, I think it's called the Kendo or Hendo hoverboard, and it looks really cool. Like, it's, of course, costs a ton of freaking money because it's brand new. But, man, the thing looks amazing. And, of course, all the comments are like, you guys got to hurry up. Like, at least we got it before 2015. But now you guys just have to make, like, the little Mattel version and all that stuff. So it's exciting to see some of these things outside of the fact that they're in Back to the Future. It's not just like, hoverboards. But even as a genuine bit of technology, that's unbelievable. Like, we have actual hoverboards. They hover like a little bit off the ground, and definitely check it out. Like, once again, I'll try to put a link down below if I'm not stupid and forget. I'll put a link down below to at least one of their videos, but they have like a little cool dev kit where the box itself hovers, and they let people play around with it and stuff if you purchase it. And it's just really cool, like, just to have the opportunity to have that technology just in the world now is just unbelievable to me. It's like this was something that was in a movie in the 80s, and as nerds a ton of people wanted it, but as an actual thing, it's just unbelievable. Like, we have hoverboards, and it will eventually develop with tons and tons of minds coming into it and knowing the mathematics and science behind all this. It's going to develop, and we're eventually going to have like hover cars and stuff because of that. And it may not specifically come out of this hoverboard, but they do have this technology. They have officially made it, so odds are I think it will come out. We'll get like hover cars and all sorts of crazy things out of just this simple little thing, which is right now just a little skateboard that hovers. It's a hoverboard. And that's one of the things that you always see in TV. Where it's like, we're gonna have flying cars, and every movie in like the 80s was like, 30 years from now, we'll just be in flying cars all over the place. And in the 70s, it was always like, yeah, all our food is gonna be in like little pill size. We'll just pop a pill in, drink some water, and you'll be full, and exercise, and all the craziness with the Jetsons and all that silly stuff. It's just really funny. Like, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if we'll ever get to that point in, just human advancement where we're going to have, an entire meal in pill form. That would be interesting. We do have IV, which is in, like, liquid form, and that is like an entire meal. You can, get an IV when you're injured and stuff, and you can't really, you're not even conscious. You get IV, it does do everything that a meal does for you, and it keeps you healthy and alive. So we might, but it's just interesting to think about all that stuff sometimes. Like, or if you go back and watch old movies, or typically if you're a nerd, you've seen a ton of the old stuff like Blade Runner or anything like that. It's like, oh, we're gonna have cyborgs and all this crazy stuff. Heck, even Transformers, when that came out, that took place in like 2003 or something silly like that. In the movie, the old 1980s movie, it was like 2005 in that film. And it's like, oh, Transformers, and they help advance stuff in the human world, and all this sort of silly stuff, which is kind of funny. And you come to 2005, back then it was like, meh, we didn't really have that much. We always have little advancements here and there, and it's always, of course, very cool. No matter what we get, the more advanced it is, typically speaking, the better it is. That sometimes does backfire on us depending on what the invention might be. But human advancement and technology advancing us, having all these new capabilities, whether it's through simple stuff like a hoverboard, which is just kind of for the nerds really, or just really advanced things like hover cars, even though we don't have those yet. Just all sorts of stuff. Is just interesting how we advance over time, and just how we have advanced, really, like flying planes. I think I remember reading something about that where it was like the first plane was invented, and then by like only a decade and a half later, or like 2 decades later, we already had planes like full in the airplanes going from like state to state. And when you think about that, from like the Wright brothers making like a little, like the first plane ever, and then you only go like 20 years later, we have like full, 20, 30 years later, we have like full airplanes. That's like crazy to think, like rockets and stuff like that, from here's the first plane ever to rockets in like 30 years. If you think about it in the grand scheme of things, that's really huge. And there's been, all sorts of crazy things that we don't really know about as far as creations, and ancient things. Like, there are like old forms of batteries. I remember I watched like an old episode of Mythbusters, and they made this thing, and it was like an actual battery. Like, they had to use a bunch to actually power up this one thing, but it was a real battery. Like, it had the power of batteries, and it charged something. And it was like, well, if it worked like this, what the heck were they making back then that they had real batteries out of, like, liquids and things like that in a pot? And it's just crazy to think about that type of stuff, and all the things that we have just lost over time, all this sorts of weird stuff, which is already way too serious for my channel. Like, it's far too, like, this whole topic right now about human advancement is way too serious and admittedly advanced for my channel. It should all be just silly, stupid nerd stuff. But it's just something to think about. Like, even though this kind of came off of me just, liking 2015 because it's the year of Back to the Future Part 2, it is just something that you kind of have to think about. Like, the things we've come up with, good or bad, like, admittedly, as much as I love pop, it is bad for us. Like, I'm not going to stop drinking it, but it's something that we've created. It is a little thing. And something crazy I just learned, I was watching The Talking Dead, and they have these little moments, for anyone who doesn't know, of course, where they show like little random facts about the episode and little things like that. And they also have this part where they do a little quiz, and they did a quiz and it involved a lollipop. And the answer was like just a color. What was the color of it? And so the answer was green and stuff. And then they give little bits of information about the scene or something random. And because it was about lollipops, they put it in like no one really knows who invented the lollipop, but it actually dates back to like ancient Egypt, which kind of blew my mind. I honestly thought that came out as like just a little thing in like maybe the 50s or something. Honestly, I had no clue that the lollipop was just ancient. Like, I had no idea whatsoever, but that just blew my mind. And there are just a ton of things, like sayings are one of those weird things where you think is really recent, but there's a ton of stuff that is unbelievably old, like Old West type old, or even older than that. And it would kind of blow your mind if you knew certain sayings were, like centuries old or something like that. And it's kind of funny to think about those types of things as well. Like swagger is a thing that's technically an old term. People use it a bit differently now, of course, but I think it kind of meant the same thing. It kind of just meant like, you were kind of fancy or rich or whatever at the time. But there are all sorts of silly things and, human advancement, all sorts of crazy stuff to think about. And I don't know how I really dived into human advancement over, from Back to the Future. But, there's human advancement for you guys. So if you have any comments about that or, whatever seriousness, since I kind of brought it up in this episode, whatever random seriousness that you guys have as far as human advancement or, anything. It doesn't have to be technology. I know that's really what I use because I'm, admittedly as a nerd, I'm kind of just into the games and computers. So that's kind of where I see it. But I know there's been tons of things. I mean, cures for diseases and all sorts of really, really useful stuff compared to just, pop, admittedly. I mean, come on. But, of course, if you guys have anything, please put those down in the comments below. And I'm actually going to end this episode here. I don't really have another topic for you guys. But, of course, if you guys have a topic that you want me to talk about, then all you have to do is put it down in the comments below. And, of course, leave any feedback that you guys have, how long my episodes should be, because I do kind of have them sporadic right now. I kind of do sound like I plan on doing them as an hour, but sometimes, like today, if I just don't have a lot, then, I just, boom, half an hour or so. But, of course, I want some feedback from you guys if you like what you're hearing, if you don't like what you're hearing, lengthwise, more or less. And then, like I said, if you have any topics, put them down in the comments below. And, of course, thank you guys for listening.